Om Sadasiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Welcome. This is the 8th and the last of the current sessions. It was meant to be an introduction into Advaita Vedanta, but welcome even to the last one. And the idea is to generate interest, see if this is for you, and then see what we want to do from, it now looks like the end of March onwards, probably start a more formal course, see if people are interested in doing that. But more about that later. Last week we had a fabulous session, didn't we? Yes, you're the only person here who was actually here last week. It was very profound. We just didn't record it, that's all. So what we'd like to do is in this last session do some questions and answers, and if those dry up, then we can talk about various things. We can talk about the Panchakosha, the 5 coverings that Advaita Vedanta talks about. What is that all about? We can talk a little bit more about the 3 bodies that we are all said to have. How does that relate to things? So that can be quite interesting. I think we've done the karma thing enough. Everybody understands about the doctrine of karma. Interesting though it is, because people always want to know what's going to happen after I die. So we've done the karma thing enough. So really, questions, first of all, things that are unclear, or things that you've heard about Vedanta or any of this wisdom tradition that you just want clarified, because that's what these sessions are really for. I'm willing to take any questions. Have you been contemplating during your week away?
More of an escape.
More of an escape, I know. Right. Any questions that come to mind? They will come over time. All right. Last week
we. Can I ask you a question about you know how you have Ishvara?
Yes.
I'm just a bit confused about, you know how you talk about effectively the Prime Minister and all the department heads and all that. It sounds a bit hierarchical, doesn't it? I'm just, it's just moving into rules, sort of, you know, rather than...
Okay, so Advaita Vedanta says that there's only one thing, that is Brahman, and everything else is a manifestation of that, right? Which seems a very simple statement to make, but we spend our entire lives as an object amongst millions and billions of other objects, some of them animate, some of them inanimate. And in order to explain the world, we have to have a logical, rational explanation of how we find our current experience. All right. So the thing with having only one item, Brahman, and nothing else, is that Brahman would be infinite. All right. One of the things about infinity is that there's nothing else in it. If something is infinite, there is no second thing, because that infinite thing has no edge, because it's infinite. If something is infinite and has no edge, it has no form. You need an edge for something to have a form, all right? And something would have to have an edge if it was finite, because there would be some place where it is, like this table, and somewhere it is not. Brahman is said to be infinite, eternal, unlimited. That's the other thing with infinity. If something is infinite, it is devoid of space, because there is no space that it is not in. And when you're devoid of space, you're devoid of time, because time is a function of space. In order to traverse a space between here and there, you invent this idea called time. So Brahman is said to be independent of all of these things. One of the properties of Brahman, actually Brahman doesn't have properties, but one of the things that comes up as a result of Brahman and this idea is that Brahman cannot have a change of state. If something is infinite, it is always just that. Therefore, you cannot have a state where it is in one state in one way, one time, and then another state in another way, because then you'd have to have a border, you'd have to have an edge where state one moves into state two. All right? And an infinite thing cannot have an edge like that. If you cannot have a change in state, then you'd have no possibility of any action. Because action results in a change of state. You have one particular thing, you perform an action on it, and then that thing is then in a modified state, right? You perform that action. So, Brahman is a wonderful explanation of this is all there is and we're a manifestation of that, but it doesn't help us at all to understand the world as we see it. All right. The world as we see it appears to be a whole series of things, predominantly matter, to our eyes anyway, but even physics will tell you is 99.79 space. So what feels perfectly solid to us, all right, is nothing of the sort, even in physics terms. And Vedanta says, well, the reality of this table is not as real as you anyway. And we went down that explanation of how to come to that conclusion. So what Vedanta says that in the world you see are a whole series of laws, the natural laws, physical laws, gravity, and so forth. You also see a lot of powers. We ourselves are blessed with at least 5 powers that we possess through our senses: the power of sight, the power of smell, taste, hearing, and touch. Okay? And if we look at ourselves at the micro level, then we can imagine the universe at the macro level. All right? So we ourselves are individuals within the universe. We can say we are at the micro level, and if you expand out everything, then you get the universe at the macro level, which means that the power of sight that I have, coupled with the power of sight that you have, plus all the other beings, plus all the other animals, plus every other living thing in the universe together, can be called the collective power of sight that the universe possesses, all right? Of which I have my particular little bit. All right? And you can take that, the micro and the macro, for almost every power that you come across. And what they did in the ancient world was effectively allocate to each of these collective universal powers an idol in the form of a demigod. Right? So if you were starting to go blind, then you would pray to the God who represents the universal collective power of sight, because that would be the right focus for you to pray to in order to improve your sight. Right? It was done, as we all do, in order to give this idea that there is something stronger than me. Once you think of yourself as an object within a world of objects, where you consider yourself to be finite, you have a period of time during which you're on the planet, fleeting in time in comparison to universal time. When you consider yourself to be insignificant and so limited, then yet You are provided on this planet. You did nothing for your creation. You do very little for the actions that perform around you, right? You breathe, but you didn't invent the percentage of oxygen around you, all right? You perform all of these actions, and these are given to you. Your eyes are given to you. Your nose and mouth are given to you. Your one heart but two lungs are given to you. Once you consider yourself to be the recipient of all of these items collectively brought together as you, a limited self, then you're obliged to invent the idea of God. Right. If these things are given to you without anything of your doing, then you're obliged to at least consider the idea of, is there a giver? And therefore, it seems quite intuitive to say, I have power of sight. That sight is failing. Let me go and pray to the demigod, who's effectively the giver of the power of sight throughout the universe. That's how demigods were effectively invented. And that's why I gave the comparison of a government department, that each department has got a head. So if you've got an issue with your passport, you'd go to the Home Office, right? You wouldn't go to any other department. And that department would have a head that you could ultimately go to, who's in charge of all the power necessary for the problem area that you currently have. That's what demigods were, all right? And demigods were organized, so there was a head demigod, right? In this demigod structure, in the olden days, it was Indra. Indra was the head. In fact, Indra was the god of rain, but considered to be so powerful. So things like rain and fire are constituent parts of everything that we need to live. So they're considered to be very powerful areas, focus of energy and ability, all right? So that's how people, and remember that 99.99% of people believe in the idea that they are a separate, finite, mortal, limited entity in a world of objects. In order to do that, this is how their world was controlled, and effectively we have in there the idea of devotion. And if you modernize that concept, then you have the concept of religions today, where you may not have departmental heads, but you got a total head of everything, and you go to that God, your particular God, and say, God, I don't have this particular thing. Can I please go to you? You have universal power. You can give it to me. All right. The one fundamental problem with this idea of the little old me and this God with universal power and presence, right, is that this universal power of presence we tend to consider to be infinite. I mean, technically, when you consider God, you think God is all-powerful, right, ever-present, all-knowing, right? That means what you have is an infinite God. There's no point in having a finite God, because there'll be some bits of power that he doesn't have, and I wouldn't know who to go to, right? The whole idea of a God in religion is an infinite God. But the moment that you look up to that God as somebody that's separate from you is the moment that you've turned that infinite God into a finite God, because you are outside that infinity. And you can't have it. You can't have it both ways, right? If there is an infinite something, you must be part of that infinite thing. You cannot be outside it. But these things weren't understood by the vast masses of people, and they still aren't. And as a result, this was the first step on your spiritual path, is to overcome the egotistical view that I am everything there is, I control my world, to saying, I'm now going to transfer part of that ego to an external factor to say, God, you control that part of the world. It's your first stage of giving up this self-centric view. So Bhakti Yoga is considered to be the first path down your spiritual path.
What was that, sorry?
Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti means devotion. You probably know as Bhakti, Bhakti, yeah, right. It's actually Bhakti Yoga, but it's a guttural thing. So, it's the word for devotion. So that's considered to be the first stage. All right. So that's how the demigods are organized, in order for the majority of the population who still feel themselves to be separate can have an environment in which they feel that their prayer is being listened to in some way. And we talked about why do we pray is because although we think that we perform the actions, all we do is initiate them through our will. The results of actions aren't determined by us. And the story is
The person that wants to catch the bus.
Yes.
Or the street.
yes,
And you can have 3 outcomes.
4 outcomes.
4. Okay, so I got that, yes, 4. So you have some expectations, you want to arrive home, let's suppose at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
So you go, one outcome is you go, you take the buses on time, you reach your expectations.
Yes.
Is the one I focus.
Yeah.
The other one is the bus is late. So you are, well, you can be angry, upset or whatever because they are different, less than your expectations.
Less than your expectations, correct.
Then is a friend just passed by in a car and said, oh, I bring you home, I take you home. So you are happy and it's better than your expectations.
Better than expectations.
And the other one is crossing the road, you didn't see there was a bus coming and you wake up a few days later.
In hospital.
In a hospital, yeah.
That's right. So it's completely opposite to expectations. The thing is, in all 4 cases, I initiated the task of crossing the road in order to have a valid outcome, which was I wanted to catch the bus and go home. All right. But in all 4 cases, the environment created the result. Right. I had nothing to do with what the environment created. So I always initiate, but the situation, the universe finishes the task. And prayer is basically saying, dear universe, can you please organize yourself so that the result of this action I'm about to perform is either as expected or preferably better than expected. That's what prayer is for. All right. And who are you praying to? You're praying to the collective power that would organize itself, that would have the ability to organize buses and roads and banana peels and cars and your friend's timetable and all of those collective powers that are needed. That's who you're praying to. So it's often easier just to say God and give him all of that. Yes.
But this is a thought pattern that's depending on intelligent design.
Yes.
Whereas it's much more likely, surely, that it's just random.
It is just random. Well, the thing is that Vedanta says that there's no such thing as random. Anything that happens is an effect. All right? So, and every effect needs a cause. You do not get an effect that says, ta-da, here I am, right? Every effect requires a cause. Therefore, an accident, right, is an effect for which you do not know or understand the cause. Therefore, a random result is something for which you do not understand the cause. There has to be a cause for there to be an effect.
But is it an intelligently applied cause, or is it just what is?
So, in order for the cause to take place, you need 2 elements in the cause. You need an intelligence that starts off the cause, and then if you're creating an effect that is a material effect, then you need material as the cause. These are the two things, right? So the classic was done. Let's go back to the table. A wooden table has two causes. The table is the effect, has two causes. One is the intelligent cause that knows what a table is to be used for, knows how to make a table, and can make a table. That is the carpenter. That's the intelligent cause, right? And second is the material cause, which is the wood. So if every cause has an intelligent cause, intelligence can only reside in a conscious being. You cannot have intelligence residing in an unconscious being. And therefore, if every effect has a cause, and that cause has an intelligent cause, that intelligent cause comes from a conscious being. It is not a just is.
Can I ask, say, in the middle of a jungle where there are no people, there are just animals,
Yes.
trees and
Yes.
boulders and stuff.
And lovely they are too.
There is cause and effect there. Animals jump into the water, they may get eaten by a fish, they may eat a fish.
Yeah.
A branch might drop from a tree and hit an insect and crush it, or
Yeah.
insects might burrow into trees and eat the tree and kill it.
Yes.
Where is the intelligent cause of that? Is that in Brahman, or is it in the insect, the animal?
What caused the water to flow? What caused the tree to grow? Right? What caused it to break? Natural laws. Natural laws follow an intelligent outcome. Right? So where did the intelligence of natural laws come from? Natural laws themselves are an effect. So where is the cause?
Does there have to be an intelligent cause? This is what I'm saying. Can't it just...
Vedanta says that there is no effect without a cause. If you think that something just is...
No, by material cause. I suppose I'm wondering if there is material cause without intellectual cause. And is that just nature happening?
Well, any material has to result in something that material makes up. All right?
Like a tree growing.
Yes. There's definitely an intelligent cause there.
The question
Yes.
is, can we define intelligence?
Can we define intelligence?
Because maybe this is where the question is.
Yeah. You always need the intelligence. The intelligence comes from a conscious being, right? Because intelligence cannot come from a stone. And that intelligence is not a being as we consider it, somebody with arms and legs, because the intelligence that puts everything in the universe together must be an infinite intelligence.
Or is it just the laws of nature?
It is the laws of nature, but who creates the laws of nature?
Does there have to?
Well, the thing is, no. If you're in a study class of Vedanta, you can't say, I'll define it up to laws of nature and I'll forget everything up to the laws of nature. All right? You're not defining everything right down to scratch. It's like having religion and saying there is a God. We'll forget the fact that this God is a finite God, but we'll treat him as infinite God and forget everything backwards of that. All right? You have to explain the entire system. You cannot leave anything out.
That's the Vedic position.
That's the Vedic position. And the logical view is, I can't leave anything out. I want to understand the underlying reality of everything. And therefore, I must understand everything and not leave something out. Because when I leave something out, the piece I leave out, I form according to my belief. If I leave something out, then basically I'm saying that's the part I believe. I'm not going to look any further. I'm not going to go down to the logic or the experience. I just believe that nature's laws came into being. That's blind faith.
Say, oh, this is good. I'm going to hammer my boyfriend when I get home.
It-
I was just giving you this.
Right. It is blind faith. You have to resolve it all the way down to the bottom. All right. If you're going to come to an understanding of everything, you have to resolve it all the way down to the bottom.
But that's how people understand things, isn't it? So
Yes.
there is, sometimes you have to have faith to understand.
Yes, and indeed, you have to have faith even when you're listening to somebody talking about Vedanta. You have to have faith because what you're listening to may be completely new information that you aren't able to process yet. And what you have to do is you have to have what they call sraddha, and one of the definitions of sraddha is faith. You have to have faith in what is being said by a competent teacher, subject to future verification. You must always verify yourself, and it must be direct through your experience. Otherwise, it's not worth knowing. Yes?
Coming back to the concept of meaning God. So are we saying that the Vedas believed in gods?
No. What the Vedas say that they are the collective term for the energy associated with all the different powers, and they give them names. And this is important. The Vedas themselves are a manual for everyone. All right. So since most of the population are people who haven't even heard of Vedanta, let alone understand it, the majority of people are people who are still into this me and God duality. Therefore, the majority of the Vedas are actually rituals that you perform to these demigods in order to achieve what you want to get as a result. The Vedas are a manual for life. What do I want in life? Oh, I want a better looking wife, or I want a richer so-and-so, I want a better child, I want no child, I want no husband, whatever it is that you want, all right, the Vedas have a ritual for it. And if you perform it, all right, they will actually say if you perform it correctly, that outcome will come into being. In this life. All right? It's full of rituals, and that's part of what we'll be studying in the Katha Upanishad as well.
Okay, so it's the ritual. So you cannot get out that philosophy of having...
No, the philosophy bit hasn't come in at all. So the early part of the Vedas, all right, the Purva Veda, Purva is the early part, Purva Veda, or Veda Purva, often known as, is the early part, and all is very ritualistic. You know, you'll get up, this is what you perform, this is what you do, this, and this chant this prayer, and all of those are written down. The power of those rituals are magnified significantly if you're really focused. And that focusing comes through the chanting of the mantras and meditation. So this early part of the Vedas then moves into meditation and how to still your mind so that you can be totally focused on the rituals that you're performing to accelerate the results of them. During this meditative section, you come to realize that the results that you are now aspiring to are limited. Because you come to realize that everything that there is in this world of objects is limited. It has a birth, it has a lifetime, and it dies. And therefore, if you're trying to change the world, because that's what we try and do through a ritual or a prayer, we try to change the world. Why do we try to change the world? Because we think the world is the source of our happiness. And when the world no longer provides the happiness that we seek, we try to change the world to provide us that happiness. All right? But that's a finite action. I perform a ritual. That creates a result. The ritual is finite. The result must be finite. You cannot have an infinite result from a finite action. All right? So you perform these rituals in order to have your life to be easier than it is, more suited to what you want it to be. But eventually you come to realize that your happiness is not dependent on the outside world. Because if it is, your happiness will go up and down depending on the availability of the outside world to you. Right? If you've always ever dreamt of having a child, right, and for many years no child comes, and you do the very certain pujas and things like this, and a child appears, you are deliriously happy. All right? But should that child die before you, all right, think of the unhappiness that you will create within you. Your happiness is dependent on that child. And every object comes into being, has a presence and goes down, whatever that life cycle may be. For an ant is very small, us is bigger, for a mountaintop is longer still. All right. So once you come to realize that your happiness is not dependent on the outside world, then you can say, what can I make it dependent upon? I don't want to be dependent on anything else. I want to be independent of the world. I want to be happiness for my own sake. Then you start to look internally and say, is there a source of happiness that is not limited? And now the end of the Vedas, the Vedanta, starts to come into play. And that's where the Upanishads, that's where the wisdom teachings are, to say that yes, there is a way to tap into that unlimited happiness that is not dependent on the world of objects. All right? And let me tell you how to get there. And that's what Vedanta does. But having gone through the meditation, you have prepared your mind to be able to listen and to be able to assimilate the wisdom that comes at the end of the Vedas. Okay? Does that answer your question on what does the Vedas think about gods? It's required for the early section, because if you're going to have a ritual, who are you going to have a ritual focused for? You need an idol, you need the idea of a god, you need a concept.
But the question is a bit related with the previous one.
Yes.
It was, can you consider that God is not an intelligence, it's just energy?
Yeah, you can call it energy, but then energy isn't the final end point. All right?
You can see that energy is just the energy.
Energy is an effect. You have to say what is the cause. I mean, the simple equation E equals mc squared, all right? Einstein's equation says energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So here you have something that is intangible, energy. You can see the effect of it, but you can't actually see it, is equated to mass, which means solid objects, the speed of light that you can measure squared. So we get to a stage where energy is not...
But no one has been able to define energy. Well, anyway, let's leave it.
I agree with you. Nobody has been able to define energy, but the energy itself is because scientifically, we haven't proved it further back than energy. But energy itself must be an effect.
But an intelligence is a bit of trying to see a mirror of ourselves. the concept of intelligence.
Right. This is where you must really get out of your mind the Western effect of that intelligence comes in a form that is other than me. Because when we talk about intelligence and when we talk about creation and we talk about God, we always think about something that we put on a pedestal that has got higher intelligence than me, that is in some way driving this entire system. That is not the case. What Vedanta says, if there is only one fundamental underlying reality, then that must be the source of all material, all intelligence, and all power. There's only the one thing. If it is infinite, then that one thing must manifest itself as different objects in the world, of which I am one. So that one underlying energy is the underlying reality of me. It's not that I am experiencing the energy or the actions of something else that is intelligent. That intelligence is me. Right? Yes.
Can I ask this? So, this means that the whole system is the intelligence.
Yes.
So, I'm just getting this. Brahman
Yeah.
has no personality.
No.
No personality. Ah, yes.
Because it doesn't have a change of state. It can't go angry and then happy.
No.
No.
No. So Brahman can't get angry with you.
No, can't. Yeah. Yeah.
So
In fact,
Brahman is not God.
yeah, that's right. It's the ultimate reality. Yeah.
That's it.
Is not God.
No.
Okay?
If the five elements constitute everything in the world, and the elements and the five senses, is that the same thing? No.
No, they aren't.
So the five elements which constitute everything, what are they?
So the next stage to say from that statement that's just been made, that Brahman is not God, all right, is not capable of any action, is not capable of any emotion, is actually not capable of thinking, right? Thinking means that there was a point where you, before the thought and after the thought, is a change of state. Brahman is not capable of changing state if it's one infinite thing. Yet we appear to be in a world of objects, all right, that appear to be distinct from one another. I'm here, there's the table there, I'm not the table, I haven't been a table all my life. And yet this table is distinct, separate from me. You're telling me that the underlying reality of the table is the same as the underlying reality of me. So how come I'm not a table? And how come the table doesn't know what I'm thinking? All right? This needs to be explained. And this apparent reality, this power of projection, right? First of all, the power of veiling. The fact that everything, the underlying reality of everything is Brahman, is veiled from us, right? And then in its place is placed a series of objects, of names and forms. This veiling power and this power of projecting something else onto it is what is attributed to Maya. And the explanation they have, they always have little anecdotes to tell you what Maya or anything else is about. Maya is that power where when you're in a dimly lit street, there is a coiled rope in front of you, all right? And you see that rope as a snake. So the two things that have happened there, one is the reality of what that rope is that is a rope, has been hidden from you. You do not see the rope. And onto it has been projected a snake. There is no snake, but it's been projected onto the rope so that you're entirely believing that that is a snake. So it's said that by the power of Maya, what is the underlying reality of everything is projected as if it's a world of objects. All right? Now, yet the objects are different. All right? The objects are different. I can imagine how Brahman manifests itself into these apparent realities of objects. Right? But the objects are different, and therefore the objects themselves must be organized in some way, and that organizing power is given the name Ishvara. And Ishvara is therefore, in Vedantic terms, the translation of God. Not Brahman. Ishvara, with the power of Brahman, which is all collectively within the infinite that is Brahman, gives us this world of names and forms. All right. And since we've now got Brahman and we've got the power of hiding something for what it is and projecting something in its place, plus we've got the intelligent cause and the material cause, Ishvara is said to be the intelligent cause and the material cause, which by the power of Brahman manifests as all the objects in the world. Now, when it's said like that, you think, oh. And he expects us to accept it as subject to future verification. What the Upanishads do is that they systematically take you through that understanding. This is not a belief system. This is a knowledge system. And therefore, you must come to know before you can accept. Yes.
And what do they refer by God?
What do they?
What do they understand as God?
Ishvara. Ishvara.
Is the God like?
There is no separate God. So Vedanta says there's not many gods, there's not one God. They say everything is God. Because this Ishvara, with the power of Maya, expresses Brahman as all of the individual aspects of the world. Therefore, if Ishvara is the underlying basis of you through the power of Maya, then God is represented through you.
What does that make Maya then? Maya's not God.
Maya's not God. Maya is the power of veiling and projection that allows this world to appear to be the way it is. It's one of the most difficult concepts in Vedanta to get over.
Where does Maya come from?
It must be, there is only one source of everything, that's Brahman, all right? So Maya, this force must be within Brahman.
Part of Brahman.
Yeah.
Intrinsic to Brahman.
Yes, that's right.
It just is.
So why everything can't be Brahman?
It is. Everything is. Right? But it appears in these separate objects. Right? As a result of the force of Maya. If it wasn't the separate objects, you wouldn't be able to study it. You'd have no experience. Experience requires more than one object in order for you to experience. So the very fact that we are having this experience now must be explainable. Otherwise, you don't have a philosophy that works.
So are these the 5 elements?
No,
So you haven't answered that yet.
I haven't answered that yet.
I'm getting confused.
Right. So if you have a material cause of the universe, then you must have material. Now, thousands of years ago, and without the electronic microscope, they had a periodic table with only 5 elements on it. Right? They looked at the world, and their 5 elements were effectively space, air, fire, water, and earth. All right? They just looked at nature and they said that these are the 5 elements. And the topmost are the most subtle, and as you go down, they get more and more gross. All right? And each one below is contained in the one above. So air is, you need space before you can have anything within it. All right? So air is contained within space, fire has air and space within it, right? And so forth. So this is the way it was formulated. So we effectively had 5 elements. But these 5 elements were considered to be in pure form when they were the constituent parties to our subtle bodies. We were said to have a physical body that everybody knows is called physical because it's tangible. It's available to our senses, physical body. But we also have a subtle body. How do we know that we have a subtle body? Memories, emotions, all these things that we can think about, yet we can't touch, right? It must reside within a subtle entity within us. And that part is called the subtle body. All right? So the 5 elements in their pure form are said to be the components of the subtle body. All right? In their pure form. And then Vedanta invented what would be the modern equivalent of chemistry and molecular structure by saying that these 5 subtle forms, 5 pure forms, can become 5 gross forms. The grossification of these pure 5 elements. Remember, you asked the question. So imagine that you have 5 piles, space, air, fire, water, and earth. Imagine that each pile, you did it in little cubes, and you've got 8 cubes in every pile. All right? You have 5 piles of 8, and they're all 8 are the same because they're in the pure form. The grossification of matter, as Vedanta describes it, is where you take, to grossify space, you take 4 out of the 8, i.e. you take half of space, then you add 1 of each of the others into space to create grossified space. So if you have then air, out of this 8 air, you take 4 of them, and then you add 1 part from space, from fire, water, and earth to create grossified air. So it's molecular structure, basically. And these grossified elements were therefore the material cause of the universe, whereas the pure elements were the material cause for the subtle part of us, the subtle bodies. So I know a drawing would be better, or even little kiddie blocks. I had thought of trying to steal my granddaughter's kiddie blocks this morning, but I shied away from it. So to explain how they consider the grossification. Remember, 5,000 years ago, without electron microscopes, this is the closest that they came to some sort of pure, and then we have the concept today of pure elements. We have molecular structures, they attach together in certain numbers, and this is the way they explain the world. All right.
Theoretical physics, isn't it?
In the early days, that's right. Yeah, they had to figure out how these things had to be. But here's the crunch. We have a physical body. We have a subtle body. Both of these are known to us, right? So somebody could say to us, no, you don't have a subtle body, but I know that I've got a subtle body, all right? They may not be able to find where my memories are, but I know that I have memories. So that's a given. But the subtle body itself must be an effect. And therefore, if I have a subtle body, which I know that I have, then there must be a cause of the subtle body. And therefore the concept of the causal body came up. Something that is imperceptible to our senses, imperceptible to our knowing, but which must exist for the subtle body to exist. So we are said to be split into these concepts of the three bodies: the physical body, the subtle body, and the causal body. And that, if you consider it at the micro level, is us. You consider that at the macro level of the universe, that's what the universe is. So the universe is also universal physical body, universal subtle body, and universal causal body. Because the universe is a direct mirror image of us, but on a much, much grander scale. All right? And then Vedanta seeks to describe each of these and how they come into being and why. Things like this.
I guess the problem is that we're just naming all these things. And then if the Vedas were like just manifested, they wouldn't have this naming. And that's what creates the confusion.
The confusion is created, first of all, we are created as human beings, the top of the structure, because we have the power of discrimination. We have the power to be able to analyze information into whether it is true or not true. All right? We can go through that thinking process. Now that is something that process itself is duality. It's given to us as an individual. We live in a dual world, in an experience of duality, using language that is necessarily duality. Yet what we're trying to study is non-dual. That's where the problem comes. It is provable. It is provable logically. Right? The reason that is not provable by what you consider to be science is because all science is observational. We can only study objects. That's what study means. You study an object. I want to see a plant grow. How does it grow? Well, I look at this seed and I water it and see how it grows, all right? I can do it repeatedly. I can get another seed, water it in the same way it grows. You take any experiment. How long is this? How heavy is this? What is the compound created when I mix that and that together? Everything, all of science is observed. Science never deals with the observer, right?
Doesn't logical discourse deal with the observer though? We're like what we're doing now, logic, but at each step, I mean, it has to be if, therefore, like a computer program.
That's for...
The problem is when you haven't made that if reality, if you haven't accepted it, if you haven't understood it, then you can't go on to the therefore. So how do we, I think that's the difficulty. It's getting to a point where each of those steps can be said, okay, I've got that, that's concrete. Now I can move on. I think we're still in a stage where we're thinking, hang on, maybe this isn't...
No, you can do those stages as concrete because there is the one underlying truth that is absolutely, it's not Brahman, it's absolutely concrete in our mind. And that one underlying truth is I exist. That is the first nail. That is the block of concrete. If you start off saying I don't exist, then we have a problem. We need to bring in people with white coats to take you away. So the first thing that you know for absolutely sure is that I exist. You don't need any other means of proof to know that you exist. So that is the first nail. That is the first solid foundation from which the whole of Vedanta rises. It's the only truth that you know for certain. Everything else you come to know as a result of your senses, right? And anything that you come to know as a result of your senses is subject to doubt.
Didn't the twin slit experiment prove scientifically that there's an observer and the observed?
It proves that an effect differs according to whether there is a conscious observer or not. Yes, it did do. It's a proof that there's a difference in the effect. It didn't prove why.
No.
Right? Again, what the two-slit experiment proves is the effect. It's an object, right? I've got these two. I've got a spatial distribution and I've got a wave, right? In fact, what you could be considering is that it actually is proving that the universe has these two forms of a physical body and a subtle body. It could be proving that. And that in a physical body, what you've got is particles, and in a subtle body, what you have is waves. Right? We don't know. Right? Science hasn't got that far yet. It's observational. All science is observational. It does not look at the subject. Right? And the thing is that we cannot learn anything except by objectifying it. And here we are to learn Vedanta, to study Vedanta. Actually, Vedanta is not studied to understand Vedanta. Right? Vedanta is studied in order to eliminate suffering. That's why many people would say it's not a philosophy. Philosophy is a subject you study for its sake in order to understand the truth. Here, you're not studying Vedanta for Vedanta's sake. You're studying it in order to eliminate personal suffering, to understand the world in a different way. You're trying to study the subject. You're the experiencer, you're not the experienced. You're the knower, you're not the known. Right? Yet you're trying to study the knower. The moment you objectify the knower, it becomes the known. And therefore you have to say, who's the knower studying this? This is the problem. Because we have no mechanism. We have no mechanism of studying something that is not an object. Therefore, Vedanta is considered to be the means of knowledge by which we may understand the subject. Right? Because intuitively, we know, whenever we know anything, we know that we are the knower. Right? And the knower and the known cannot be the same. There's no way it can be the same. Right? The believer and the believed cannot be the same. The owner and the owned cannot be the same. The knower and the known cannot be the same. We are the eternal knower. Just as when you look at a photograph, you know that there must have been a camera present, but you cannot see the camera. You cannot study the camera from the photograph. You need other mechanisms to come to the conclusion of what the camera was. All right? And that's what Vedanta is. It's a means of knowledge to understand the self. It only comes at the end of the Vedas, having gone through all the aspects of life where I want, desire that leads to action, right? Action creates a result. Do I like the result or not like the result? I now have a desire to perform my next action. And we're in this cycle of life, right? And then we die. And Vedanta says that you can still be in this life, but you can understand what is its underlying true meaning. And that's what the Veda Anta, the end of the Vedas, tell us through the Upanishads, which are 108 in number, but we tend to study about 11, of which the Katha Upanishad is one.
So will the next sessions be about the first part, or?
No. So this is Advaita Vedanta classes. So we're assuming that if you had a ritualistic, if you had a devotional path, you were brought up in your own religions or your own thought patterns, that has happened, all right? That the very fact that you're in this room now means that you want to understand a little more. You are classified as a seeker, all right? And Vedanta says, whenever you come to seek, the system will find you a teacher. And therefore, we're here to study Vedanta. We're here to study the end of the Vedas. And these are best studied through detailed examinations of the Upanishads. And the Upanishads effectively are two-way conversations between a teacher and a student, where the student keeps on asking a question and the teacher then explains what the question is. They're often in the form of a story to make them more interesting, all right? And the Katha Upanishad, I think some of you have studied before? 3 of you have studied before? We've read it, okay. So the Katha Upanishad, very, very quickly, summary of it, is that it's a father decides, quite a wealthy person, decides to perform a ceremony where you're supposed to give up everything that you have. It's a ritual, right? In order to have untold happiness in heaven. It's one of the rituals. And he starts to give things away, and he has an 8-year-old son, and the son realizes that dad is only giving up things that have no more value, i.e. barren cows, land that don't produce things, and so forth. And then he says to his father, well, I'm one of the things that you have. When are you going to give me up? Right? If you're supposed to give up everything, when are you going to give me up? And he asks this 3 times. And the father sort of avoids him first 2. And the 3rd time he says, oh, so angry, he says, to death with you. All right? In a fit of anger. So this little boy then therefore goes up to Lord Yama, who is the demigod in charge of death, the collective demigod for death. And this little boy, as an 8-year-old, goes up to Yama, and Yama happens to be not home for 3 days. And in those days, boy, even though he's only 8, but he's male, he will not go into the household of female. So he waits outside without food and drink. And Yama comes back and says, awfully sorry, I kept you outside for 3 days. Give me, I will grant you 3 boons, all right, to make up for my not being here. And so the little boy, for an 8-year-old, is extremely clever, all right. So first of all, the first boon that he asks for is that give me a ritual by which all things may be granted. So he does it for everybody else who may want something in life, that they should have a ritual, and if they perform the ritual, then they will get whatever they seek in life. And Yama says, okay, I can do that. The second one, he asks for himself, or rather, for his cause, he says, when I go back to my father, may my father not be angry with me. All right. And in this thing, this little clever boy has basically said, although I'm at death's door, I don't want to die because I want to go back to my father. And when I go back to my father, he's going to be okay with that because he actually instructed me to go. All right. And that's going to sort itself out. So he's just come back alive again by the second boon. And the third boon, he said, I want to know that by which everything else is known. All right. Very clever little boy. And Yama says, I can do you the first two, but the third one is so difficult that not even the demigods fully understand it. And the little boy says, no, you gave me your word that you'll give me 3 boons. And so after a lot of, Yama tries to persuade him with untold riches, untold wealth, a very long life, all the elephants and gold and maidens that an 8-year-old could possibly want. And he still says, no, I want to know the truth. And so Yama then starts the teaching. All right. And it's a one-to-one teaching to Nachiketa, the name of the boy. That's what the Katha Upanishad is all about. It is in 2 chapters. Each chapter has 3 sections in it. All right. And it will take us some time. I intend to study each section, i.e. 1/6 of it, in 4 weekly classes, 4 Sunday classes. So effectively starting March the 24th, for the 4 Sundays, I've got a piece of paper with these dates in it. So March 31st, April 7th, April 14th, this will study section 1, chapter 1. And I have quite some extensive notes which will form part of the class, and every class will be recorded. Every class will be recorded and the video made available so that people can refer to it later. Now, as you know, that these first 2 months we've done on a donation basis. I propose that for the classes, they're just done on a chargeable basis. So what I've said on these classes, that they would effectively be £8 each. So that's £32 per section, payable the one time, or if you want to just come in class and class ad hoc, it'll be £10 at the door. These things make a lot more sense when you study them systematically. If you miss out weeks, it actually takes time to get back into it. It is possible, and with the notes and the video, it is possible. I realize that not everybody can make every week, but you do need to look at the notes from the previous week, because the first part of the class is always a review of what did we do last week. So it is a bit of a commitment, but it is a fabulous Upanishad, and it conveys the entirety of the Vedantic knowledge within it. If there was no other Upanishad you were going to study, this would be the one I'd recommend you study. Right. And this is one that we've done in our classes twice. So this would be the 3rd time I'm going through this Upanishad. So I'm getting better at it. And and the notes are getting more refined. It's ended up with something like 120 pages of notes or something like that, PDF on it. And I actually provide the mantras, then the meanings, we read the meanings, and then a description of what the meanings might be, right? And it's a Q&A thing. So it is a real understanding, because sometimes if you just read the translation of the mantras, it's like a Times crossword. You have no clue what has just been said. That's why reading of the Upanishads without somebody to explain it is absolutely no use whatsoever. No use at all. All right? Because not only do you not understand it entirely, you may understand it partially, and you may misunderstand it, which is the worst thing of all. All right. So that's what I would recommend. If you want to follow this path, take at least one of the sections, see how it goes. First section obviously introduces us to the story and gets in, and so the deeper you go, the more profound the teaching gets. And as I said, it's in 6 sections, organized as 2 chapters. We will do chapter 1 before the summer, then we'll take a summer break, and then do chapter 2 after the summer break, leading up to Christmas time. That's how long it'll take. So on Sundays, it'll be in this room, and you're most welcome. Any other questions we have from today? Yes?
Maybe not related at all. Do they believe in classes? I suppose the answer is no.
Believe in...
I mean, in society.
Right. No, it's a very good question, because if you ask any Indian and say, what's this caste system that you have? They say, oh, we have this caste system of 4 castes. And the word caste is a Portuguese word, and it came from the 15th century. It's not part of Vedanta, right? What Vedanta says, what it understood, what the wise ones understood, is that if you take any section of society, you will have a distribution of intelligence in that society, all right? And distribution of capability amongst people in that society. And they categorize these into 4 categories, what they call varanas. So they said they're the really bright ones, high IQ. They should be there fundamentally to teach, right? Because they're bright enough to do that. Then you get the ones that are are good administrators, they are leaders, and they should be the ones who do government, who take part in war, protection, security, all right? Then you have a third section that they said these people are best in trade and business. So let these people, their varana should be trading. And then they said you are bound to get a quarter of society, right, who are not able to perform the 3 other tasks. And they will principally be providing a service function to these first 3 categories, right? This is how they said, if you look at a spectrum of any given population, you will find this. And therefore, according to your ability, you are given a role in society, right? What happened was that the ones who became priests, and typically in a family, because you've got that same gene structure. So if you've got a major warrior and he has a son, he'll bring him up to be a warrior and he'll teach him the skills to be a warrior, and a businessman might do the same and the teacher might do the same. Teaching, priesthood was all in that, the intelligent category, all right, brahmanas. So what happened was that people said, even if they had a son or a daughter who is not quite up to par in their category, they refused to move them to another category. So the priests said, my children will always be priests, irrespective of what their ability is, all right? And this whole system got adulterated, and eventually it started to flow with the family. But the idea of the lower caste, the untouchables, was invented by a parliamentary act in 1857 in this country. All right. It was done in order to create a segregated society within India, so that they said that this class of people were criminal by birth. That's what the act says, criminal by birth, and therefore could be placed in an isolated environment, all right, because they would do harm to others. And it allowed a complete separation of a quarter of the Indian population into this untouchable caste, all right. Then you had the problem of the other 3 saying, oh my goodness, thank God we're not in that class. They started to get a superiority complex to this class. This class had the inferiority complex, and you suddenly started to get a conflict within society, which is perfect if you want to rule the society, which is what the British were doing at that time. So the untouchables, the class of untouchables, was created by an act of parliament. It was not created by the Vedas. But the Vedas understood this concept of Varanas, which means that you had a designation, you had a guild for which you were suited. And it was your duty to apply your skill set to performing the tasks of that guild.
So it was more to you to find
where you are in society. That's right. According to your ability, so you could maximize what you could give back to your society by your own abilities. That's how it was created. But then human mind got in the way, all right? And it slowly got adulterated. Then you add all these other things, influence and acts of parliament, and suddenly we come up to the crazy bit where Indians will tell you that this is part of Hindu culture, right? And they tell us that, right? And you ask them, and they say, oh, I'm of this caste. What caste are you? And they don't know where the word came from. They don't know the word Varana. They don't understand it, because for 300-400 years, this is a system that's been ingrained into the psyche of the entire Indian population. And then the Westerners take a look at it and say, ugh, what a horrible society system you have, all right? Forgetting where it came from, because they have no knowledge of it either. And the Indians themselves aren't able to explain it away either.
And yet it's explained well in the Gita,
Yeah.
especially as
Yeah.
regards the warrior,
Yeah.
because that I've got a better understanding about this duty
Yeah.
than your caste
Yeah.
from the Gita.
Yeah. So this, the Bhagavad Gita, because of the warlike environment that it describes, the Kshatriyas is a caste of these warriors, these administrators, and so forth. And it says that you are born into that caste. Arjuna is being talked about by Krishna. You're born in, it's your duty to do that. And it's a thing in Vedanta of which the Bhagavad Gita is basically a dilution of the Upanishads into 700 verses, right, for the masses. And the one thing that comes out of it is that you are there to perform your duty, right? Because when you perform your duty, the rights of others are granted. We've turned into a society where we go after rights rather than duty. And we protect rights through laws. But what Vedanta says, when you perform your duty in a dharmic way, in an ethical way, you will guarantee the rights of others. Right? And that was always the teaching. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other bits?
It's not like it's the same overall society, like finding your true purpose, isn't it?
It is, always, because, I mean, human beings are no different, whatever society, whatever culture you're from. The questions people ask in their own mind, in their own language, is exactly the same, all right? And you're at most peace when you're in tune with your ability, being able to provide the maximum of what you can provide in society. And that's when you feel at most ease, right? Most of the time, all the tension and the stress is caused by people doing things that they're actually not good at. But they feel that they have to.
That's Western culture. Though.
That's Western
There
culture.
have been so many jobs where you could actually look around the whole company and see that the people who could do a particular job were not allowed to. And the people who couldn't were forced to.
Yes, that's
If you
right.
try and swap over, there's hell to pay.
That's right, I know.
Management doesn't like it. If
No.
you say, look, actually, we'd be better if we swapped jobs.
Yes,
Very perverse.
I know.
And this idea of rights
Yeah.
responsibility. That
Yes.
really annoys me.
Yeah, that's right. And it's becoming more and more, and let's have more and more rights, and let's have another law to protect that right, and another law. I mean, eventually you can't do it. You can't do it by law.
Well, you won't be able to function.
Exactly.
You won't be able to function.
Exactly. And
This makes everyone
but
very
what's the amazing thing is that if you perform your duty
Yeah.
in an ethical manner, the rights of others are guaranteed. And that's the beauty of it, right? You don't need laws for it. You just need to control yourself and your actions, which is the only thing that's under your control.
Yeah. Can I just say, I did go to India 2 years ago, and our guide, he started in the coach by explaining the caste system. And he said, but we don't believe that, you know. And he said, you know, Jackie here, he should be an untouchable, but we don't believe in that. And the driver here, he's, I don't know, merchant class or something. But he said, but we don't believe in that. And he said, but I'm Brahmin.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And you could say that how much teaching do you do, right?
Oh, he does, he's a tour guide.
He's a tour guide, yes, that's right, yes.
But he was telling us that because of the universities now being open to everyone, and because of the schools for the poor children being free, you're getting some very bright children from the lowest classes going to university, and they completely ignore the caste system. Once they're at university or medical school, they fall in love.
And there is positive discrimination, which means that there are more spaces allocated for what are considered the lower caste than the higher caste. But that also disrupts the system. Everything should be ideally according to ability rather than where you were born. All right. But
It's happening,
yes.
but only amongst those who go away to university. And he said the class that isn't changing is sort of the middle class,
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
which
They're
is
staying there.
interesting.
Yeah, they're getting caught in the middle.
The problem is the educated are their goal, our object.
It is,
Yes.
it's not
It's all
commercial.
object.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So it's causing
Some
problems as
sorrows.
well.
yeah.
I think it's very few people are into Vedanta knowledge. They don't want to know about it. It's
It's a
more.
shame, isn't it?
So it's very, very few.
Yes.
That's really good.
They say that, 1 in 1,000 will seek. So you're all seekers. You're 1 in 1,000 of the population, they say, will seek, right? 1 in 1,000 seekers will come to know. So are you the 1 in million people? That's about 63 in Britain. that'll actually come to know what this is about. And have we packed them all into this room? All right? That's what they say. 1 in 1,000 will seek, and 1 in 1,000 seekers will come to know. Come to know meaning come to know fully, and be that. So there you go. That's what the odds are. It is very, very, very small. But you can't play towards those odds until you're 1 in 1,000. At least you hear it, and then you try and become 1 in 1,000 who hears, in order to be able to understand.
But one needs a teacher.
One needs a teacher to explain it through, to ask the questions until, so first thing is Manana, Shravana, Nityasyana. Shravana, Manana, Nityasyana. So Shravana is where you hear it, all right? So you hear it without judgment. You hear it so that you can understand it fully, all right? And then Manana is when you contemplate it. And with that, you eliminate all the doubts you may have about that knowledge, typically through questioning with the teacher, until there's no part of what you've heard that is now not known to you and fully understood. And Nityasyana is in quiet contemplation, is when you make that knowledge your own. All right. So in order to go through the first phase of Shravana, you need to be able to place your ego to one side. Because what we tend to do with information is that we take it in and we immediately process it with what we know. Does that sound right? Does that sound believable? Right? Do I want to believe what I've just heard? The problem with that processing is that you are processing something that's new with knowledge that you already have. All right? It means that if you reject something, you can never accept something that is absolutely new to you. Because you're basing it based on the criteria of what you already know. And this knowledge is new to you. So you have to just park that judgment to one side to say, I'm going to listen to this completely so that I understand everything that's been said. I could even repeat it back verbatim, but subject to future verification.
So you don't mind if we ask questions?
No, not at all. They have to be asked, all right? But you must also listen without judgment so that you understand the information when it goes in, and then you must mononize the analysis. And the analysis all the way until there is no more doubt in your mind about the knowledge. All right? It's all, and this is through Q&A with the teacher. All right? Because if you block it out at stage 1, you will never get to stage 2. Because you'll only judge information that comes to you based on what you already know. If this information is new, what are you going to judge it by? So you have to put ego to one side to say, I'm just going to listen to what's been said, and then I'm going to crunch it through, and I'm going to ask all the questions that's possibly possible to ask. All right? And only when I'm happy will I say, yeah, I'm okay with that information. Now I'm going to go into contemplation. I'm going to make it my own information. You must go through those stages. Right. Shall we close? Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnashya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishtate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.